An adventure in the early hours. Arian held the piece of paper in his hand. It was labelled Arborilla's Nail Polish Formula. Below the title were the necessary instructions and ingredients to make the polish. Capriciously scribbled at an angle in the corner were the adjustments and dilutions to turn a cosmetic accessory into fluency coating. Arian stood in the creator's shack trembling. He wasn't cold, although night was setting in outside. It was sheer excitement. He lit the other torches with the one in his hand to illuminate the building's wooden walls and predominantly wooden interior. Health and safety was not something Crank prided itself on. With some more light to guide him, Arian searched for the ingredients, ever clutching the valued paper. It was never easy locating anything in the creator's shack, but Arian's drive had reached new heights. He could finish the fluency. The end was in sight. He could finish it tonight. Arian didn't notice time as he scuttled around the room like a crazed squirrel. Every so often he would find one of the items on the list and place it next to the fluency. Midnight was almost upon him when he located the last ingredient on the list and placed it down with the others. Next came the amalgam. All the elements were the same. However, whichever creator had made the list had left a note stating that several of the items were only needed to make the colour and would not hinder the performance of the coating or the nail polish if left out. Arian was relieved. He wasn't convinced he had the stomach to extract the red colouring from so many ladybugs. He lit a fire under the biggest pot the creators possessed and started to concoct. The recipe specified at several points the mixture needed time to sit. Arian did his best to stick by these rules, but anticipation got the better of him and he often short-timed these periods. Even so, it was well after midnight when he completed the formula, and the nauseating smell filled the shack. He removed the pot and carefully stamped out the fire. The fluency lay bare on the floor, basking in the glow of the torches. Arian acquired a suitable brush and set to work. Arian was pleased with himself. The ridiculous grin on his face showed that. Then again, that could have been because he was getting some sort of high from the organic odours clinging in the air of the room. The lightheadedness might have also been to blame for the next stage in Arian's plan. Arian slipped from the shack as the first coat dried, and the fresh air did nothing to return his senses. Before he left, he had put out all the torches. He wasn't a complete idiot after all, and knew flammable liquid when he smelt it. He took no torch with him either. His only light came from Endos, which was in a lazy mood and only cast a very dim glow down to Crank. That was fine by Arian. What he had in mind wasn't strictly speaking, or even leniently speaking, legal. Truth be told, it was robbery, just not daylight robbery. He was heading for one of the few stalls in Crank that was not attached to a house. This stall didn't have anything that most people would consider worth stealing. Most people in Crank, if they were going to steal something from a stall, would go for one of the creator's inventions. Most people might think about grabbing themselves some meat. Most people. The stall did not sell any of the creator's items, nor was there meat on its shelves. Two key attributes that immediately made it one of Arian's favourites. On top of that, what it did sell was plain and simple clothes, good breads and tasty things to put on them that did not previously have a face. Arian liked the place very much, and Mr. Tudo, who ran it. He did feel a twang of guilt for what he was about to do, but he numbed the cord. The door was stiff, but he prized it open and stepped inside. Squinting, he collected the ingredients for sandwiches and swiped some water. He placed the imminently stolen goods outside, and out of his pocket he took a lock and key he had found at the creator's shack. Mr. Tudo had been yammering his ear off, not 2 weeks ago, about how he was worried about his produce's safety. The security system was worth more than what Arian had taken, and the double irony was not lost on Arian when he closed the door and left the device sitting on the counter. The fluency was still not dry, so he started preparing the sandwiches. When he finished, he licked his fingers and kissed the air. The creators had kindly left a picnic box behind, which Arian filled. He took a long look at the fluency and chose to give it another coat. Then he grabbed Eden and Cole's bedding and headed outside. He walked upstream and made himself a bed at Sunrise Point. Arian's eyes flicked open. In the distance, up the Jutta, an orange stripe beamed across the horizon. He gathered up the rugs and scurried back through the still sleeping Crank. In the shack, he made his preparations. The Floyncy had dried. He upturned it and lowered it into the channel. He placed the picnic basket at one end before sticking both the paddles across the seats. Finally, he grabbed one of the blankets. He had almost everything he needed. Arian's pace was now subdued, and inside his head it was not a whirlwind of thought. His mind was blank. His feet just seemed to take him while his brain took a siesta. At the house, there was a problem. Pedantic Arian seemed to think it was some sort of civic faux pas to break into two places in one night. The Hartleby residence had survived both Floyncy builds reasonably well. There was the odd gap in the walls, and, with the sluggish sun slowly rising, he peered inside and spotted Lirna. He edged round the building to Lirna's corner. Luckily, there was another missing panel, though Lirna had actually done that one herself, so she could see the stars. Arian lay down on the sand. Lirna's face was there, facing his. He gently blew on her. Lirna's eyes opened. A lesser person might have screamed, or pulled away, or made some sort of noise. Lirna just stared. "I've got something to show you." Lirna looked back blankly. A lesser person may have misconstrued Arian's intentions and given him a right good slap. Arian tried again. "Would you like to see it?" Her eyes didn't even blink. "Lirna?" "What time is it?" "Early. Or late. I'm not quite sure. Somewhere in the region where it could be either one. Will you come?" "What is it?" "You'll have to come and see." Lirna scoffed. "Fine. I'll meet you out front." She emerged wrapped up in clothes, bearing tired eyes. This better be good. For the first time, it dawned on Arian that Lirna might not actually appreciate being woken up at this ungodly hour, to be presented with a silly little dinghy and asked if she would like to take it for a ride. He said nothing, but led her to the shack. He guided her through the mess he had added to the craters and stopped at the channel. "I finished it." Lirna walked the channel to observe the Floyncy more keenly, but said nothing. Arian could not bear the silence. He gulped and took a deep breath. "Would you like to come across the Jutta with me? I've made sandwiches. We could have breakfast across there if you like." Lirna regarded him. "Sorry?" She had understood. She just wanted to hear him say it again. "Would you like to come with me across the Jutta?" asked Arian, while wincing like he was about to be hit. "Yes." Bumbling and flabbergasted, Arian aided Lirna into the Floyncy, keen as custard to get her into the open water before she could change her mind. He bustled down the walkway and opened the channel doors. Turbulent water gushed in. Arian jumped in behind her. She already had one paddle in her hand. He picked up the other and used it to push off. Slowly they drifted closer to the gate and the unknown. "What happens now?" "What do we do with these?" asked Lirna, holding up her paddle. Arian looked at his sceptically for a moment, but perked up and answered, "We'll pick it up." The Floyncy crossed the threshold. Together, they steered the Floyncy, so the prow was pointing slightly upstream. In the centre, where the Jutta was most powerful, there was not much they could do against the current. Arian allowed the Floyncy to turn downstream, and he and Lirna pushed it towards the bank. Once they were through the thick of it, they turned and made their heading slightly upstream. After that, they seemed to be in the clear. Seemed to be, until Lirna said the fateful sentence. "Arian, my foot's cold." "Yes, it is a bit nippy out in the open, isn't it? But we'll reach the bank soon enough. The wind won't be so strong on the land." "Goodness, this is all rather exciting." "No. Well, yes it is, but what I mean is my foot's cold because it's wet." Arian looked down. There was a puddle forming. The Floyncy had sprung a leak. "What do we do?" he said hysterically. "Did you bring a bucket?" Lirna looked straight ahead to the land. "Paddle." Paddle they did, out of sync and frantically. The Floyncy ground into the sandy beach. Arian hopped out with a splash and pushed the buoyancy up the beach so Lirna could get out without getting wetter. She landed gracefully on the sand. "How's the water?" "Frigid," squeaked Arian. He staggered ashore and hauled the buoyancy fully onto the beach. "What now?" "What do you mean, what now?" asked Arian, although it was more of a statement, and he did not wait for an answer. "We're in an entirely new place that no one has ever seen, and I've made us breakfast, and you ask, what now? What now? I'll show you what now." All right. All I meant was that we seem to be in a bit of an issue with getting back." "Oh, that. I wouldn't worry about that. I'll come up with some way of fixing it," he said with some confidence, and later that actually felt slightly better. "And if I can't fix it, then there's nothing that can be done anyway, so I definitely wouldn't worry about it." Arian picked out the picnic basket and blanket, which had miraculously remained dry, and cheerfully gave them to Lirna. She scowled, having not appreciated Arian's last remark, but he seemed not to notice. He flipped the buoyancy to drain the water it had collected. "Which way would you like to go?" Lirna looked around and shrugged. "Well, how should I know? I don't know what is in any direction." "That's the point. It's up to us to find out." He smiled. "Come on. We've spent our whole life living on that island. Let's go inland." "Let me take those." He grasped the picnic basket and lifted it from her hands. "Actually, I think I'll hang on to that." Lirna took the blanket off the basket. Somehow, when the ragged bedding touched her shoulders, it transformed into an elegant shawl. She followed Arian across the sand that gave way to tall grassy reeds and gradually became a lush grassy plain. They walked until the sand was in the distance, and far ahead Arian spotted a forest. They still had fruit trees in Crank, but they hadn't had anything even remotely resembling a forest in generations. "Do you see that? There, it's a forest. Do you want to see how close we can get?" Only the bottom tip of the sun remained below the horizon. "Can we just stay here?" said Lirna. "Look around, isn't it beautiful?" Twinkling through the blades of grass was a spectrum of flowers. Crank had flowers, but none were even half as glorious as those that were to be found on that plain. "Yes, of course." Arian put the picnic basket down and gestured for Lirna to give him the blanket. She did, and he laid it out crisply. "Have a seat if you like." "No, I'd like to just stand for a moment." "Suit yourself." Arian unpacked the food and drinks. Lirna's dress swayed in the light breeze. She simply breathed in her surroundings, the new smells and sounds and sights she had never known. She took all the time she needed. Once she had her fill, she sat down, cross-legged, next to Arian. "Thanks for bringing me," she whispered as she picked up her sandwich. Arian didn't reply, and no reply was needed. Lirna took a bite of the sandwich. Her eyes widened. "This is delicious," she said with her mouth full. Her shoulders sagged. "Oh, you have no idea how good it feels to be able to do that without the fear of anyone seeing me," she added with the sandwich still in her gob. Arian smiled. "I'm glad you like it." "What's in it?" Crumbs projected. "This and that. What's the meat?" "There isn't any," said Arian. "But a sandwich isn't a sandwich without meat." "Oh, really? It was delicious a moment ago." "Well, it still is," said Lirna, struggling now. "It's just, I don't know. I've never had a sandwich without meat, but it's nice." Arian finished his and brushed the crumbs from his hands over the grass. He kicked off his shoes so his socks could dry, and linked his fingers behind his head and lay down. The sky was blue now, pale with streams of wispy clouds. The sun's glow spread across the land like butter on toast, seeping into all the dark hollows it could find. The land in turn absorbed the light and came to life. The flowers that Lirna had been so fascinated by were joined now by countless others. The cold grass of the night was plushed with open petals, wafting their scents in the air, and the occasional bumblebee passed them in search of gold. Lirna found herself lying next to him. "When do we have to leave?" "Soon, but let's not think about that just now." Lirna sat up. "I'll pack up lunch." Arian's eyes opened from their tranquility. "I really wouldn't worry about it just now. It'll only..." "Shh! I was just... shh! There's a critter." At Lirna's hand signals, Arian rose slowly. There was, indeed, an animal. A grey animal. A grey animal with long floppy ears. A grey animal with long floppy ears and a little white tail. A rabbit. Like the rabbit, both Arian and Lirna looked as though they desperately wanted to ask a question. Neither could decide which one to start with, so all three just sat there, with their teeth jutting out. Lirna reopened her sandwich bag and carefully ruffled inside. When her hand came out, she was holding a scrap of discarded vegetation. She held it out low over the grass. The rabbit's nose twitched, and it took a couple of hops towards the offered foliage. "What are you doing?" hissed Arian. "It might not be safe." "I don't think so, Arian. It's just lettuce." "Not the greenery, the greyery." "But he's so cute." She adopted the voice all humans revert to when talking to an animal they think is sweet. "Look at his whittle ears." "Yes, but shh. But I said shh." The rabbit hopped a little closer. The thought that these greenery-bearing gods might be dangerous hadn't crossed the rodent's ears. Other than Crank, there were no humans in these parts, and they had been somewhat marooned up until now. Rabbits, therefore, had no justification for fearing man. Of course, the whole point in the fluency was to change that, but for now, the rabbit remained ignorant. Hop, hop, hop. It stuck its nose into the air and sniffed again. A couple more bounces through the lush grass, and it was within touching distance. It stretched its neck out and plucked the lettuce from Lirna's hand. She turned to look at Arian, her face glowing. "Arian, look! Look, it's eating!" "Yes, I see." "I gave it lettuce and it's eating it." Lirna returned her attention to the rabbit. The leaf was gone, but the rabbit remained, hopeful of more. Tenderly, she reached out and stroked the rabbit's head with a finger. It seemed to enjoy the sensation and tilted its head towards her. Once it had had enough, it hopped away, but remained close to the blanket. "Aw, Arian, can we keep him?" "What? Can we keep him? Please?" "Say it properly and I'll think about it." "Please, no." "Why not?" Arian scrunched his face at the rabbit. "I'm not sure it's a good idea." "Why?" "For starters, we're not supposed to be here. We can't take it, back. People would notice and ask questions." "No, I would be super careful. I promise. No one would see him," pleaded Lirna. "Where would you keep him?" "I guess I would have to build something to keep him in, so people couldn't see him, and then let him out when no one was watching." "See, there it is. Do you really think it would enjoy being locked up and only let out when you see fit, as opposed to living here, where it has all the space it wants?" "But it's selfish. You're only thinking about your own feelings, rather than its. Who knows, maybe when we come back it will remember you and come again." Lirna could see that he was right. Admitting it was another matter. "Shall we go?" Arian got to his feet before offering Lirna a hand. He put his shoes back on. They weren't dry, but certainly drier than they had been when he took them off. He packed up and headed back to the beach. Lirna took a last look at the rabbit, which was nibbling away at something before she followed. Crank came into view across the water as they approached the bank. They reached the fluency, and he remembered about the hole. "What now?" "I'll think of something. Just give me a moment." Arian took a look at the now mostly dry fluency and could see where the Judah had got in. It was just a tiny crack, where the coat hadn't quite done its job. It didn't need to be fixed here. All it needed was a temporary solution that would ensure it made it back. He started to search the beach for something to stuff the crack with, but there was nothing. He tugged off his boot and pulled his sock off, while Lirna sat on one of the dunes, watching the waves come and go. Arian tried to lodge the sock into the fluency from as many angles as he could, but it was no use. The sock was too thick, the stitching too coarse. It would never fit. He thought about what else he could do, but there was nothing for it. He conceded and returned his sock and boot to his foot. Arian approached Lirna. "Any joy?" He gritted his teeth and scratched the back of his head. The thing is... What the thing is... Jeez, this is hard. Lirna, would I be able to have your sock, please? Sorry? Yes, quite right. It was absurd of me to ask. No, said Lirna. I mean sorry, like A question, as in, sorry, can you repeat that? Just so I can fully comprehend what you're asking, as opposed to, sorry, no, you can't have my bloody sock. I wouldn't ask, it's just I've tried mine, and it's too thick. Yours are more delicate. I really wouldn't ask, but I don't see any other way of plugging the hole. Lyrna smiled. No, it's okay, as long as you have a good reason. She removed the sock in question and gave it to Arian, who bowed and offered many thanks. Lyrna shrugged them off and returned to looking majestically windswept. Arian bustled back to the Floyncy, and after some negotiation, lodged Lyrna's sock to plug the leak. He invited Lyrna over. Now, when you get in, he began gingerly, if you could just keep your foot over the sock and let me know if it gets wet. You're a connoisseur of chivalry, you know that? Arian slumped. Please, Lyrna, I feel bad enough as it is. I'm just teasing. She leaned into him and kissed him on the cheek, before she slipped into the Floyncy. Arian swayed as though he might just tip into the water, but he shook himself to his senses, grabbed the bow, and pushed the Floyncy into the river. Arian waded into his knees and turned the Floyncy so it was facing the right way. He jumped in behind Lyrna, before he pushed them away from the bank with his paddle. I think we should head upstream for the first bit, otherwise the current in the middle will push us too far past the shack. Lyrna did as he suggested, but didn't offer a reply to his statement. Instead she said, You know, a real gentleman would have offered me his socks. Arian looked down at his feet, which were wet again. Oh my, I'm so sorry. I would wet my socks. Sorry. Lyrna just laughed. The pair had their eye in with this whole paddling business, so the return journey went much smoother. Even with Lyrna informing Arian that the sock was now wet, the two didn't panic. The only issue that arose was when they realised that returning the Floyncy to the Crater's shack via the Juta was going to be an impossible task. As the Floyncy approached the destination, the two agreed that it could not be done. They headed for the sand just next to the shack, where, not so long ago, the Craters had revealed the Floyncy triumphantly to the people of Crank. Arian and Lyrna now had to sneak one back in. They beached successfully, cleverly tucking behind the shack and the benches that had been positioned for viewing the Floyncy, now poetically used to conceal it. Once Arian got the Floyncy up the beach and Lyrna was out, the two went to check to see if the close was clear. There were a few people out already, but it was only going to get worse. They went back and dragged the Floyncy up to the corner of the shack and waited for the opportune moment. When no one was looking, they sprang into action, dragged the Floyncy to the door, opened it, and as quickly as they could, tugged, pulled and wriggled and shoved. Once inside, Arian collapsed, and Lyrna retrieved her sock and found somewhere to hang it. She lay down not far from Arian. Neither had realised just how exhausting the morning had been. The door slammed shut. Arian catapulted to his feet and almost fell into the channel. Arbrella announcing her presence seemed to have that effect on him. Lyrna woke less energetically. Sleeping while you should be working? Dear, oh dear. The king will certainly want to hear about this, and I'm sure he'll agree a suitable punishment is in order. Arian thought he had a rough idea of what Arbrella's idea of a suitable punishment was. She would disagree. She would say he had absolutely no idea, but she was happy to educate him. No, we weren't sleeping while we should be working. Arbrella ran her finger over a surface. Oh, come now, Arian, you've been caught, she said, observing the dust on her digits. Best thing you can do now is accept it and learn the life lesson that will be dealt to you as a result. No, but we weren't. We just sort of rearranged our working hours is all. Arbrella opened her mouth to retort. Just look at the Floyncy. You saw it a couple of days ago and now it's finished. We couldn't have done that if we'd been sleeping on the job. And last night we were so close to getting it finished that we worked through the night to get it completed. It's finished? Asked Arbrella, taking a step towards it. Well, almost. She stopped and stared at Arian. Almost? It isn't quite watertight yet. We've given it a couple of coats. Actually, it's quite interesting. The recipe is basically the same as the one for your nails. Arian gulped. Yes, those nails. It's wet. Yes. After 2 coats we tested it to see if it would float. It does for the most part, but there is a small crack that the coat hasn't covered yet, so it might take a couple more before that is sorted. Why is there a picnic basket? Once we knew we were going to be here all night, we got food. Yes, but why did you need a picnic basket? Arian stumbled. Lyrna stepped in. We ate outside, on the blanket, under the stars. It was magical. Arbrella retched. As queen, she didn't need to pander to couples' disgusting love tales, and could react to them in an appropriate decorum. Still, something wasn't right. Something about this story didn't make sense. For one thing, nobody as pretty as Lyrna would ever work through the night, certainly not vertically. If she had spotted the sock, she might have pieced it all together, but thankfully for Arian and Lyrna, it was a rare instant of something slipping her gaze. I will return this afternoon, and this, she pointed at the fluency, had better be finished. Properly finished. She rounded on her heel and was gone. Lyrna broke the silence. Well, look at you, Mr. Naughty Little Liar. She ruffled his hair. It's necessary in my line of work. It's far easier to put out fires if the royalty doesn't know about them in the first place, said Arian. After a moment he added, You're not so good yourself.